Chapter 56, The Avenger. They all four entered the tent. They had no plan ready. They must think of one. The king threw himself into an armchair. "I am lost," said he. "No, sire," replied Athos. "You are only betrayed." The king sighed deeply. "Betrayed?" "Yes, betrayed by the Scotch, amongst whom I was born, whom I have always loved better than the English." "Oh, traitors that ye are!" "Sire," said Athos, "this is not a moment for recrimination, but a time to show yourself a king and a gentleman. Up, sire, up. For you have here at least 3 men who will not betray you." "Ah, if we had been 5, murmured Athos, thinking of D'Artagnan and Porthos. "What do you say?" inquired Charles, rising. "I say, sire, that there is now but one way open. Lord Winter answers for his regiment, or at least very nearly so. We will not split straws about words. Let him place himself at the head of his men. We will place ourselves at the side of your majesty, and we will mow a swath through Cromwell's army and reach Scotland." "There is another method," said Aramis. "Let one of us put on the dress and mount the king's horse. Whilst they pursue him, the king might escape." "It is good advice," said Athos, "and if the king will do one of us the honor, we shall be truly grateful to him. What do you think of this counsel, Winter?" asked the king, looking with admiration at these 2 men, whose chief idea seemed to be how they could take on their shoulders all the dangers that assailed him. "I think the only chance of saving your majesty has just been proposed by Monsieur de Herblay. I humbly entreat your majesty to choose quickly, for we have not an instant to lose. But if I accept, it is death, or at least imprisonment, for him who takes my place." "He will have had the glory of having saved his king," cried Winter. The king looked at his old friend with tears in his eyes, undid the order of the Saint Esprit which he wore, to honor the 2 Frenchmen who were with him, and passed it around Winter's neck, who received on his knees this striking proof of his sovereign's confidence and friendship. "It is right," said Athos. "He has served your majesty longer than we have." The king overheard these words and turned around with tears in his eyes. "Wait a moment, sir," said he. "I have an order for each of you also." He turned to a closet where his own orders were locked up and took out 2 ribbons of the Order of the Garter. "These cannot be for us," said Athos. "Why not, sir?" asked Charles. "Such are for royalty, and we are simple commoners. Speak not of crowns. I shall not find amongst them such great hearts as yours. No, no, you do yourselves injustice, but I am here to do you justice. On your knees, Count." Athos knelt down, and the king passed the ribbon down from left to right as usual, raised his sword, and instead of pronouncing the customary formula, "I make you a knight." "Be brave, faithful, and loyal," he said. "You are brave, faithful, and loyal. I knight you, Monsieur le Comte." Then turning to Aramis, he said, "It is now your turn, Monsieur le Chevalier." The same ceremony recommenced, with the same words, whilst Winter unlaced his leather cuirass, that he might disguise himself like the king. Charles, having proceeded with Aramis as with Athos, embraced them both. "Sire," said Winter, who in this trying emergency felt all his strength and energy fire up, "we are ready." The king looked at the 3 gentlemen. "Then we must fly," said he. "Flying through an army, sire," said Athos, "in all countries in the world is called charging." "Then I shall die sword in hand," said Charles. "Monsieur le Comte, Monsieur le Chevalier, if ever I am king." "Sire, you have already done us more honor than simple gentlemen could ever aspire to. Therefore gratitude is on our side. But we must not lose time. We have already wasted too much." The king again shook hands with all 3, exchanged hats with Winter, and went out. Winter's regiment was ranged on some high ground above the camp. The king, followed by the three friends, turned his steps that way. The Scotch camp seemed as if at last awakened. The soldiers had come out of their tents and taken up their station in battle array. "Do you see that?" said the king. "Perhaps they are penitent and preparing to march." "If they are penitent," said Athos, "let them follow us." "Well," said the king, "what shall we do? Let us examine the enemy's army." At the same instant, the eyes of the little group were fixed on the same line which at daybreak they had mistaken for fog, and which the morning sun now plainly showed was an army in order of battle. The air was soft and clear, as it generally is at that early hour of the morning. The regiments, the standards, and even the colors of the horses and uniforms were now clearly distinct. On the summit of a rising ground, a little in advance of the enemy, appeared a short and heavy-looking man. This man was surrounded by officers. He turned a spyglass toward the little group, amongst which the king stood. "Does this man know your majesty personally?" inquired Aramis. Charles smiled. "That man is Cromwell," said he. "Then draw down your hat, sire, that he may not discover the substitution." "Ah," said Athos, "how much time we have lost." "Now," said the king, "give the word and let us start." "Will you not give it, sire?" asked Athos. "No, I make you my lieutenant general," said the king. "Listen, then, Lord Winter." "Proceed, sire, I beg." "What we are going to say does not concern your majesty." The king, smiling, turned a few steps back. "This is what I propose to do," said Athos. "We will divide our regiments into 2 squadrons. You will put yourself at the head of the first. We, and His Majesty, will lead the second. If no obstacle occurs, we will both charge together, force the enemy's line, and throw ourselves into the Tyne, which we must cross, either by fording or swimming. If, on the contrary, any repulse should take place, you and your men must fight to the last man, whilst we and the king proceed on our road. Once arrived at the brink of the river, should we even find them 3 ranks deep, as long as you and your regiment do your duty, we will look to the rest." "To horse!" said Lord Winter. "To horse!" re-echoed Athos. "Everything is arranged and decided." "Now, gentlemen," cried the king, "forward!" And rally to the old cry of France, "Monche and Saint." "Denis, the war cry of England is too often in the mouths of traitors." They mounted, the king on Winter's horse and Winter on that of the king. Then Winter took his place at the head of the first squadron, and the king, with Athos on his right and Aramis on his left, at the head of the second. The Scotch army stood motionless and silent, seized with shame at sight of these preparations. Some of the chieftains left the ranks and broke their swords in 2. "There," said the king, "that consoles me, they are not all traitors." At this moment Winter's voice was raised with the cry of "Forward!" The first squadron moved off, the second followed and descended from the plateau. A regiment of cuirassiers, nearly equal as to numbers, issued from behind the hill and came full gallop toward it. The king pointed this out. "Sire," said Athos, "we foresaw this, and if Lord Winter's men but do their duty, we are saved instead of lost." At this moment they heard above all the galloping and neighing of the horses Winter's voice crying out, "Sword in hand!" At these words every sword was drawn and glittered in the air like lightning. "Now, gentlemen," said the king in his turn, excited by this sight, "come, gentlemen, sword in hand." But Aramis and Athos were the only ones to obey this command and the king's example. "We are betrayed," said the king in a low voice. "Wait a moment," said Athos. "Perhaps they do not recognize your majesty's voice and await the order of their captain. Have they not heard that of their colonel? But look, "Look," cried the king, drawing up his horse with a sudden jerk, which threw it on its haunches and seizing the bridle of Athos's horse. "Ah, cowards! Traitors!" screamed Lord Winter, whose voice they heard, whilst his men, quitting their ranks, dispersed all over the plain. About 15 men were ranged around him and awaited the charge of Cromwell's cuirassiers. "Let us go and die with them," said the king. "Let us go," said Athos and Aramis. "All faithful hearts with me," cried out Winter. This voice was heard by the two friends, who set off, full gallop. "No quarter," cried a voice in French, answering to that of Winter, which made them tremble. As for Winter, at the sound of that voice he turned pale, and was, as it were, petrified. It was the voice of a cavalier mounted on a magnificent black horse, who was charging at the head of the English regiment, of which, in his ardor, he was 10 steps in advance. "'Tis he," murmured Winter. His eyes glazed, and he allowed his sword to fall to his side. "The king! The king!" cried out several voices, deceived by the blue ribbon and chestnut horse of Winter. "Take him alive!" "No, it is not the king," exclaimed the cavalier. "Lord Winter, you are not the king, you are my uncle." At the same moment Mordaunt, for it was he, leveled his pistol at Winter. It went off, and the ball entered the heart of the old cavalier, who with one bound on his saddle fell back into the arms of Athos, murmuring, "He is avenged! Think of my mother!" shouted Mordaunt, as his horse plunged and darted off at full gallop. "Wretch!" exclaimed Aramis, raising his pistol as he passed by him, but the powder flashed in the pan and it did not go off. At this moment the whole regiment came up, and they fell upon the few men who had held out, surrounding the two Frenchmen. Athos, after making sure that Lord Winter was really dead, let fall the corpse and said, "Come, Aramis, now for the honor of France." And the two Englishmen who were nearest to them fell, mortally wounded. At the same moment a fearful "Hurrah!" rent the air, and 30 blades glittered about their heads. Suddenly a man sprang out of the English ranks, fell upon Athos, twined arms of steel around him, and tearing his sword from him, said in his ear, "Silence! Yield, you yield to me, do you not?" A giant had seized also Aramis's 2 wrists, who struggled in vain to release himself from this formidable grasp. "Dart!" exclaimed Athos, whilst the Gascon covered his mouth with his hand. "I am your prisoner," said Aramis, giving up his sword to Porthos. "Fire, fire!" cried Mordaunt, returning to the group surrounding the two friends. "And wherefore fire?" said the colonel. "Everyone has yielded." "It is the son of Milady," said Athos to D'Artagnan. "I recognize him. It is the monk," whispered Porthos to Aramis. "I know it," and now the ranks began to open. D'Artagnan held the bridle of Athos's horse, and Porthos that of Aramis. Both of them attempted to lead his prisoner off the battlefield. This movement revealed the spot where Winter's body had fallen. Mordaunt had found it out, and was gazing on his dead relative with an expression of malignant hatred. Athos, though now cool and collected, put his hand to his belt, where his loaded pistols yet remained. "What are you about?" said D'Artagnan. "Let me kill him. We are all 4 lost, if by the least gesture you discover that you recognize him." Then turning to the young man, he exclaimed, "A fine prize." "A fine prize, friend Mordaunt. We have both myself and Monsieur du Vallon taken 2 knights of the Garter, nothing less." "But," said Mordaunt, looking at Athos and Aramis with bloodshot eyes, "these are Frenchmen, I imagine. Faith, I don't know." "Are you French, sir?" said he to Athos. "I am," replied the latter gravely. "Very well, my dear sir, you are the prisoner of a fellow countryman. But the king, "Where is the king?" exclaimed Athos anxiously. D'Artagnan vigorously seized his prisoner's hand, saying, "Eh, the king. We have secured him." "Yes," said Aramis, "through an infamous act of treason." Porthos pressed his friend's hand and said to him, "Yes, sir, all is fair in war, stratagem as well as force. Look yonder." At this instant the squadron, that ought to have protected Charles's retreat, was advancing to meet the English regiments. The king, who was entirely surrounded, walked alone in a great empty space. He appeared calm, but it was evidently not without a mighty effort. Drops of perspiration trickled down his face, and from time to time he put a handkerchief to his mouth to wipe away the blood that rilled from it. "Behold Nebuchadnezzar!" exclaimed an old Puritan soldier, whose eyes flashed at the sight of the man they called the tyrant. "Do you call him Nebuchadnezzar?" said Mordaunt, with a terrible smile. "No, it is Charles I, the king, the good King Charles, who despoils his subjects to enrich himself." Charles glanced a moment at the insolent creature who uttered this, but did not recognize him. Nevertheless, the calm religious dignity of his countenance abashed Mordaunt. "Bonjour, messieurs," said the king to the two gentlemen who were held by D'Artagnan and Porthos. "The day has been unfortunate, but it is not your fault, thank God. But where is my old friend Winter?" The two gentlemen turned away their heads in silence. "In Strafford's company," said Mordaunt tauntingly. Charles shuddered. The demon had known how to wound him. The remembrance of Strafford was a source of lasting remorse to him, the shadow that haunted him by day and night. The king looked around him. He saw a corpse at his feet. It was Winter's. He uttered not a word, nor shed a tear, but a deadly pallor spread over his face. He knelt down on the ground, raised Winter's head, and unfastening the order of the Saint-Esprit, placed it on his own breast. "Lord Winter is killed, then?" inquired D'Artagnan, fixing his eyes on the corpse. "Yes," said Athos, "by his own nephew. Come, he was the first of us to go, peace be to him." "He was an honest man," said D'Artagnan. "Charles Stuart," said the colonel of the English regiment, approaching the king, who had just put on the insignia of royalty, "do you yield yourself a prisoner?" "Colonel Tomlison," said Charles, "kings cannot yield. The man alone submits to force." "Your sword." The king drew his sword and broke it on his knee. At this moment a horse without a rider, covered with foam, his nostrils extended and eyes all fire, galloped up, and recognizing his master, stopped and neighed with pleasure. It was Arthur. The king smiled, patted it with his hand, and jumped lightly into the saddle. "Now, gentlemen," said he, "conduct me where you will." Turning back again, he said, "I thought I saw Winter move. If he still lives, by all you hold most sacred, do not abandon him." "Never fear, King Charles," said Mordaunt. "The bullet pierced his heart." "Do not breathe a word nor make the least sign to me or Porthos," said D'Artagnan to Athos and Aramis, "that you recognize this man, for Milady is not dead. Her soul lives in the body of this demon." The detachment now moved toward the town with the royal captive. But on the road an aide-de-camp from Cromwell sent orders that Colonel Tomlison should conduct him to Holdenby Castle. At the same time, couriers started in every direction over England and Europe to announce that Charles Stuart was the prisoner of Oliver Cromwell. Chapter 57. Oliver Cromwell. "Have you been to the general?" said Mordaunt to D'Artagnan and Porthos. "You know he sent for you after the action." "We want first to put our prisoners in a place of safety," replied D'Artagnan. "Do you know, sir, these gentlemen are each of them worth 1,500 pounds. "Oh, be assured," said Mordaunt, looking at them with an expression he vainly endeavored to soften. "My soldiers will guard them, and guard them well, I promise you." "I shall take better care of them myself," answered D'Artagnan. "Besides, all they require is a good room, with sentinels or their simple parole that they will not attempt escape. I will go and see about that, and then we shall have the honor of presenting ourselves to the general and receiving his commands for his eminence." "You think of starting at once, then?" inquired Mordaunt. "Our mission is ended, and there is nothing more to detain us now but the good pleasure of the great man to whom we were sent." The young man bit his lips and whispered to his sergeant, "You will follow these men and not lose sight of them. When you have discovered where they lodge, come and await me at the town gate." The sergeant made a sign of comprehension. Instead of following the knot of prisoners that were being taken into the town, Mordaunt turned his steps toward the rising ground from whence Cromwell had witnessed the battle, and on which he had just had his tent pitched. Cromwell had given orders that no one was to be allowed admission, but the sentinel, who knew that Mordaunt was one of the most confidential friends of the general, thought the order did not extend to the young man. Mordaunt, therefore, raised the canvas, and saw Cromwell seated before a table, his head buried in his hands, his back being turned. Whether he heard Mordaunt or not as he entered, Cromwell did not move. Mordaunt remained, standing near the door. At last, after a few moments, Cromwell raised his head, and, as if he divined that someone was there, turned slowly around. "I said I wished to be alone," he exclaimed, on seeing the young man. "They thought this order did not concern me, sir. Nevertheless, if you wish it, I am ready to go." "Ah, is it you, Mordaunt?" said Cromwell, the cloud passing away from his face. "Since you are here, it is well, you may remain. I come to congratulate you. To congratulate me, what for? On the capture of Charles Stuart. You are now master of England. I was much more really so 2 hours ago. How so, General? Because England had need of me to take the tyrant, and now the tyrant is taken." "Have you seen him?" "Yes, sir," said Mordaunt. "What is his bearing?" Mordaunt hesitated, but it seemed as though he was constrained to tell the truth. "Calm and dignified," said he. "What did he say?" "Some parting words to his friends." "His friends," murmured Cromwell. "Has he any friends?" Then he added aloud, "Did he make any resistance?" "No, sir, with the exception of 2 or 3 friends, everyone deserted him. He had no means of resistance." "To whom did he give up his sword?" "He did not give it up, he broke it." "He did well, but instead of breaking it, he might have used it to still more advantage." There was a momentary pause. "I heard that the colonel of the regiment that escorted Charles was killed," said Cromwell, staring very fixedly at Mordaunt. "Yes, sir." "By whom?" inquired Cromwell. "By me. What was his name?" "Lord Winter." "Your uncle," exclaimed Cromwell. "My uncle," answered Mordaunt, "but traitors to England are no longer members of my family." Cromwell observed the young man a moment in silence, then, with that profound melancholy Shakespeare describes so well. "Mordaunt," he said, "you are a terrible servant." "When the Lord commands," said Mordaunt, "his commands are not to be disputed." Abraham raised the knife against Isaac, and Isaac was his son. "Yes," said Cromwell, "but the Lord did not suffer that sacrifice to be accomplished." "I have looked around me," said Mordaunt, "and I have seen neither goat nor kid caught among the bushes of the plain." Cromwell bowed. "You are strong among the strong, Mordaunt," he said. "And the Frenchmen, how did they behave?" "Most fearlessly." "Yes, yes," murmured Cromwell. "The French fight well, and if my glass was good and I mistake not, they were foremost in the fight." "They were," replied Mordaunt. "After you, however," said Cromwell. "It was the fault of their horses, not theirs." Another pause. "And the Scotch. They kept their word and never stirred," said Mordaunt. "Wretched men. Their officers wish to see you, sir. I have no time to see them." Are they paid? Yes, tonight. Let them be off and return to their own country, there to hide their shame if its hills are high enough. I have nothing more to do with them, nor they with me. And now go, Mordaunt. Before I go, said Mordaunt, I have some questions and a favor to ask you, sir. A favor from me, Mordaunt bowed. I come to you, my leader, my head, my father, and I ask you, master, are you contented with me? Cromwell looked at him with astonishment. The young man remained immovable. Yes, said Cromwell, you have done, since I knew you, not only your duty, but more than your duty. You have been a faithful friend, a cautious negotiator, a brave soldier. Do you remember, sir, it was my idea, the Scotch treaty for giving up the king? Yes, the idea was yours. I had no such contempt for men before. Was I not a good ambassador in France? Yes, for Mazarin has granted what I desire. Have I not always fought for your glory and interests? Too ardently, perhaps. It is what I have just reproached you for. But what is the meaning of all these questions? To tell you, my lord, that the moment has now arrived when, with a single word, you may recompense all these services. Oh, said Oliver, with a slight curl of his lip, I forgot that every service merits some reward and that up to this moment you have not been paid. Sir, I can take my pay at this moment to the full extent of my wishes. How is that? I have the payment under my hand. I almost possess it. What is it? Have they offered you money? Do you wish a step or some place in the government? Sir, will you grant me my request? Let us hear what it is first. Sir, when you have told me to obey an order, did I ever answer? Let me see that order. If, however, your wish should be one impossible to fulfill, when you have cherished a wish and have charged me with its fulfillment, have I ever replied, it is impossible? But a request preferred with so much preparation. Ah, do not fear, sir, said Mordaunt with apparent simplicity. It will not ruin you. Well, then, said Cromwell, I promise, as far as lies in my power, to grant your request. Proceed. Sir, 2 prisoners were taken this morning. Will you let me have them? For their ransom. Have they then offered a large one? Inquired Cromwell. On the contrary, I think they are poor, sir. They are friends of yours, then? Yes, sir, exclaimed Mordaunt. They are friends, dear friends of mine, and I would lay down my life for them. Very well, Mordaunt, exclaimed Cromwell, pleased at having his opinion of the young man raised once more. I will give them to you. I will not even ask who they are. Do as you like with them. Thank you, sir. Exclaimed Mordaunt. Thank you. My life is always at your service, and should I lose it, I should still owe you something. Thank you. You have indeed repaid me munificently for my services. He threw himself at the feet of Cromwell, and in spite of the efforts of the Puritan general, who did not like this almost kingly homage, he took his hand and kissed it. What? Said Cromwell, arresting him for a moment as he arose. Is there nothing more you wish? Neither gold nor rank. You have given me all you can give me, and from today your debt is paid. And Mordaunt darted out of the general's tent, his heart beating and his eyes sparkling with joy. Cromwell gazed a moment after him. He has slain his uncle, he murmured. Alas, what are my servants? Possibly this one, who asks nothing or seems to ask nothing, has asked more in the eyes of heaven than those who tax the country and steal the bread of the poor. Nobody serves me for nothing. Charles, who is my prisoner, may still have friends, but I have none. And with a deep sigh, he again sank into the reverie that had been interrupted by Mordaunt. Chapter 58. Jesus Seigneur. Whilst Mordaunt was making his way to Cromwell's tent, D'Artagnan and Porthos had brought their prisoners to the house which had been assigned to them as their dwelling at Newcastle. The order given by Mordaunt to the sergeant had been heard by D'Artagnan, who accordingly, by an expressive glance, warned Athos and Aramis to exercise extreme caution. The prisoners, therefore, had remained silent as they marched along in company with their conquerors, which they could do with the less difficulty, since each of them had occupation enough in answering his own thoughts. It would be impossible to describe Mousqueton's astonishment when from the threshold of the door he saw the 4 friends approaching, followed by a sergeant with a dozen men. He rubbed his eyes, doubting if he really saw before him Athos and Aramis, and forced at last to yield to evidence, he was on the point of breaking forth in exclamations when he encountered a glance from the eyes of Porthos, the repressive force of which he was not inclined to dispute. Mousqueton remained glued to the door, awaiting the explanation of this strange occurrence. What upset him completely was that the 4 friends seemed to have no acquaintance with one another. The house to which D'Artagnan and Porthos conducted Athos and Aramis was the one assigned to them by General Cromwell, and of which they had taken possession on the previous evening. It was at the corner of 2 streets and had in the rear, bordering on the side street, stables and a sort of garden. The windows on the ground floor, according to a custom in provincial villages, were barred, so that they strongly resembled the windows of a prison. The 2 friends made the prisoners enter the house first, whilst they stood at the door, desiring Mousqueton to take the 4 horses to the stable. "Why don't we go in with them?" asked Porthos. "We must first see what the sergeant wishes us to do," replied D'Artagnan. The sergeant and his men took possession of the little garden. D'Artagnan asked them what they wished, and why they had taken that position. "We have had orders," answered the man, "to help you in taking care of your prisoners." There could be no fault to find with this arrangement. On the contrary, it seemed to be a delicate attention, to be gratefully received. D'Artagnan, therefore, thanked the man and gave him a crown piece to drink to General Cromwell's health. The sergeant answered that Puritans never drank, and put the crown piece in his pocket. "Ah," said Porthos, "what a fearful day, my dear D'Artagnan." "What?" "A fearful day, when today we find our friends." "Yes, but under what circumstances? 'Tis true that our position is an awkward one, but let us go in and see more clearly what is to be done." "Things look black enough," replied Porthos. "I understand now why Aramis advised me to strangle that horrible Mordaunt." "Silence," cried the Gascon. "Do not utter that name." "But," argued Porthos, "I speak French and they are all English." D'Artagnan looked at Porthos with that air of wonder which a cunning man cannot help feeling at displays of crass stupidity. But as Porthos on his side could not comprehend his astonishment, he merely pushed him indoors, saying, "Let us go in." They found Athos in profound despondency. Aramis looked first at Porthos and then at D'Artagnan without speaking, but the latter understood his meaningful look. "You want to know how we came here?" "'Tis easily guessed. Mazarin sent us with a letter to General Cromwell." "But how came you to fall into company with Mordaunt, whom I bade you distrust?" asked Athos. "And whom I advised you to strangle, Porthos," said Aramis. Mazarin again. Cromwell had sent him to Mazarin. Mazarin sent us to Cromwell. There is a certain fatality in it. "Yes, you are right, D'Artagnan, a fatality that will separate and ruin us. So, my dear Aramis, say no more about it and let us prepare to submit to destiny." "Zounds!" "On the contrary, let us speak about it, for it was agreed among us once for all that we should always hold together, though engaged on opposing sides." "Yes," added Athos. "I now ask you, D'Artagnan, what side you are on." "Ah. Behold for what end the wretched Mazarin has made use of you. Do you know in what crime you are today engaged?" "In the capture of a king, his degradation and his murder." "Oh, oh," cried Porthos, "do you think so?" "You are exaggerating, Athos. We are not so far gone as that," replied the lieutenant. "Good heavens! We are on the very eve of it. I say, why is the king taken prisoner? Those who wish to respect him as a master would not buy him as a slave. Do you think it is to replace him on the throne that Cromwell has paid for him £200,000 sterling? They will kill him, you may be sure of it. I don't maintain the contrary, said D'Artagnan. But what's that to us? I am here because I am a soldier and have to obey orders. I have taken an oath to obey, and I do obey. But you who have taken no such oath, why are you here and what cause do you represent? That most sacred in the world, said Athos, the cause of misfortune, of religion, royalty. A friend, a wife, a daughter, have done us the honor to call us to their aid. We have served them to the best of our poor means, and God will recompense the will, forgive the want of power. You may see matters differently, D'Artagnan, and think otherwise. I will not attempt to argue with you, but I blame you. Heyday, cried D'Artagnan. What matters it to me, after all, if Cromwell, who's an Englishman, revolts against his king, who is a Scotchman? I am myself a Frenchman. I have nothing to do with these things. Why hold me responsible? Yes, said Porthos. Because all gentlemen are brothers, because you are a gentleman, because the kings of all countries are the first among gentlemen, because the blind populace, ungrateful and brutal, always takes pleasure in pulling down what is above them. And you, D'Artagnan, a man sprung from the ancient nobility of France, bearing an honorable name, carrying a good sword, have helped to give up a king to beer sellers, shopkeepers, and wagoners. Ah, D'Artagnan, perhaps you have done your duty as a soldier, but as a gentleman, I say that you are very culpable. D'Artagnan was chewing the stalk of a flower, unable to reply and thoroughly uncomfortable, for when turned from the eyes of Athos, he encountered those of Aramis. And you, Porthos, continued the Count, as if in consideration for D'Artagnan's embarrassment, you, the best heart, the best friend, the best soldier that I know, you, with a soul that makes you worthy of a berth on the steps of a throne, and who, sooner or later, must receive your reward from an intelligent king. You, my dear Porthos, you, a gentleman in manners, in tastes, and in courage, you are as culpable as D'Artagnan. Porthos blushed, but with pleasure rather than with confusion, and yet, bowing his head, as if humiliated, he said, Yes, yes, my dear Count, I feel that you are right. Athos arose. Come, he said, stretching out his hand to D'Artagnan. Come, don't be sullen, my dear son, for I have said all this to you, if not in the tone, at least with the feelings of a father. It would have been easier to me merely to have thanked you for preserving my life, and not to have uttered a word of all this. Doubtless, Athos. But here it is. You have sentiments, the devil knows what, such as everyone can't entertain. Who could suppose that a sensible man could leave his house, France, his ward, a charming youth, for we saw him in the camp, to fly to the aid of a rotten, worm-eaten royalty, which is going to crumble one of these days like an old hovel. The sentiments you air are certainly fine, so fine that they are superhuman. However that may be, D'Artagnan, replied Athos, without falling into the snare which his Gascon friend had prepared for him by an appeal to his parental love. However that may be, you know in the bottom of your heart that it is true, but I am wrong to dispute with my master. D'Artagnan, I am your prisoner, treat me as such. Ah, pardie you, said D'Artagnan, you know you will not be my prisoner very long. No, said Aramis, they will doubtless treat us like the prisoners of the Philipgauts. And how were they treated? Asked D'Artagnan. Why, said Aramis, one half were hanged and the other half were shot. Well, said D'Artagnan, I answer that while there remains a drop of blood in my veins, you will be neither hanged nor shot. Sang Dieu, let them come on. Besides, do you see that door, Athos? Yes, what then? Well, you can go out by that door whenever you please, for from this moment you are free as the air. I recognize you there, my brave D'Artagnan, replied Athos, but you are no longer our masters. That door is guarded, D'Artagnan, you know that. Very well, you will force it, said Porthos. There are only a dozen men at the most. That would be nothing for us four. It is too much for us two. No, divided as we now are, we must perish. See the fatal example. On the Vendomois road, D'Artagnan, you so brave, and you, Porthos, so valiant and so strong, you were beaten. Today Aramis and I are beaten in our turn. Now that never happened to us, when we were four together. Let us die, then, as De Winter has died. As for me, I will fly only on condition that we all fly together. Impossible, said D'Artagnan. We are under Mazarin's orders. I know it, and I have nothing more to say. My arguments lead to nothing. Doubtless they are bad, since they have not determined minds so just as yours. Besides, said Aramis, had they taken effect, it would be still better not to compromise two excellent friends like D'Artagnan and Porthos. Be assured, gentlemen, we shall do you honor in our dying. As for myself, I shall be proud to face the bullets, or even the rope, in company with you, Athos, for you have never seemed to me so grand as you are today. D'Artagnan said nothing, but after having gnawed the flower stalk, he began to bite his nails. At last, do you imagine, he resumed, that they mean to kill you? And wherefore should they do so? What interest have they in your death? Moreover, you are our prisoners. Fool, cried Aramis, knowest thou not then, Mordaunt? I have but exchanged with him one look, yet that look convinced me that we were doomed. The truth is, I'm very sorry that I did not strangle him as you advised me, said Porthos. I make no account of the harm Mordaunt can do, cried D'Artagnan. Cap de Dieu, if he troubles me too much I will crush him, the insect. Do not fly then. It is useless, for I swear to you that you are as safe here as you were 20 years ago, you, Athos, in the Rue Férou, and you, Aramis, in the Rue de Vaugirard. Stop, cried Athos, extending his hand to one of the grated windows by which the room was lighted. You will soon know what to expect, for here he is. Who? Mordaunt. In fact, looking at the place to which Athos pointed, D'Artagnan saw a cavalier coming toward the house at full gallop. It was Mordaunt. D'Artagnan rushed out of the room. Porthos wanted to follow him. Stay, said D'Artagnan, and do not come till you hear me drum my fingers on the door. When Mordaunt arrived opposite the house, he saw D'Artagnan on the threshold, and the soldiers lying on the grass here and there, with their arms. Halloo, he cried, are the prisoners still there? Yes, sir, answered the sergeant, uncovering. Tease well, order 4 men to conduct them to my lodging. 4 men prepared to do so. What is it? Said D'Artagnan, with that jeering manner which our readers have so often observed in him since they made his acquaintance. What is the matter, if you please? Sir, replied Mordaunt, I have ordered the 2 prisoners we made this morning to be conducted to my lodging. Wherefore, sir? Excuse curiosity, but I wish to be enlightened on the subject. Because these prisoners, sir, are at my disposal, and I choose to dispose of them as I like. Allow me, sir, said D'Artagnan, to observe you are in error. The prisoners belong to those who take them, and not to those who only saw them taken. You might have taken Lord Winter, who, Tease said, was your uncle prisoner, but you preferred killing him. Tease well, we, that is, Monsieur du Vallon and I, could have killed our prisoners. We preferred taking them. Mordaunt's very lips grew white with rage. D'Artagnan now saw that affairs were growing worse, and he beat the guards' march upon the door. At the first beat, Porthos rushed out and stood on the other side of the door. This movement was observed by Mordaunt. "Sir," he thus addressed D'Artagnan, "your resistance is useless. These prisoners have just been given me by my illustrious patron, Oliver Cromwell." These words struck D'Artagnan like a thunderbolt. The blood mounted to his temples. His eyes became dim. He saw from what fountainhead the ferocious hopes of the young man arose, and he put his hand to the hilt of his sword. As for Porthos, he looked inquiringly at D'Artagnan. This look of Porthos's made the Gascon regret that he had summoned the brute force of his friend to aid him in an affair which seemed to require chiefly cunning. "Violence," he said to himself, "would spoil all. D'Artagnan, my friend, prove to this young serpent that thou art not only stronger, but more subtle than he is." "Ah," he said, making a low bow, "why did you not begin by saying that, Monsieur Mordaunt?" "What?" "Are you sent by General Oliver Cromwell, the most illustrious captain of the age?" "I have this instant left him," replied Mordaunt, alighting, in order to give his horse to a soldier to hold. "Why did you not say so at once, my dear sir?" "All England is with Cromwell, and since you ask for my prisoners, I bend, sir, to your wishes." "They are yours, take them." Mordaunt, delighted, advanced, Porthos looking at D'Artagnan with open-mouthed astonishment. Then D'Artagnan trod on his foot, and Porthos began to understand that this was merely acting. Mordaunt put his foot on the first step of the door, and with his hat in hand, prepared to pass by the two friends, motioning to the four men to follow him. "But pardon," said D'Artagnan, with the most charming smile and putting his hand on the young man's shoulder, "if the illustrious General Oliver Cromwell has disposed of our prisoners in your favor, he has, of course, made that act of donation in writing." Mordaunt stopped short. "He has given you some little writing for me, the least bit of paper which may show that you come in his name. Be pleased to give me that scrap of paper so that I may justify, by a pretext at least, my abandoning my countrymen. Otherwise, you see, although I am sure that General Oliver Cromwell can intend them no harm, it would have a bad appearance." Mordaunt recoiled. He felt the blow and discharged a terrible look at D'Artagnan, who responded by the most amiable expression that ever graced a human countenance. "When I tell you a thing, sir," said Mordaunt, "you insult me by doubting it." "I," cried D'Artagnan, "I doubt what you say." "God keep me from it, my dear Monsieur Mordaunt. On the contrary, I take you to be a worthy and accomplished gentleman. And then, sir, do you wish me to speak freely to you?" continued D'Artagnan with his frank expression. "Speak out, sir," said Mordaunt. "Monsieur du Vallon, yonder, is rich and has 40,000 francs yearly, so he does not care about money. I do not speak for him, but for myself. Well, sir—" "What more?" "Well, I'm not rich." "In Gascony, 'tis no dishonor, sir. Nobody is rich. And Henry IV, of glorious memory, who was the king of the Gascons, as his Majesty Philip IV, is the king of the Spaniards, never had a penny in his pocket. Go on, sir, I see what you wish to get at, and if it is simply what I think that stops you, I can obviate the difficulty." "Ah, I knew well," said the Gascon, "that you were a man of talent." "Well, here's the case, here. S where the saddle hurts me, as we French say. I am an officer of fortune, nothing else. I have nothing but what my sword brings me in, that is to say, more blows than banknotes. Now, on taking prisoners, this morning, 2 Frenchmen, who seemed to me of high birth, in short, 2 Knights of the Garter, I said to myself, my fortune is made. I say, too, because in such circumstances, Monsieur du Vallon, who is rich, always gives me his prisoners." Mordaunt, completely deceived by the wordy civility of D'Artagnan, smiled like a man who understands perfectly the reasons given him, and said, I shall have the order signed directly, sir, and with it 2,000 pistoles. Meanwhile, let me take these men away." "No," replied D'Artagnan. "What signifies a delay of half an hour?" "I am a man of order, sir. Let us do things in order." "Nevertheless," replied Mordaunt, "I could compel you, I command here." "Ah, sir," said D'Artagnan, "I see that although we have had the honor of traveling in your company, you do not know us. We are gentlemen. We are, both of us, able to kill you and your 8 men. We 2 only. For heaven's sake, don't be obstinate, for when others are obstinate, I am obstinate likewise, and then I become ferocious and headstrong, and there's my friend, who is even more headstrong and ferocious than myself. Besides, we are sent here by Cardinal Mazarin, and at this moment represent both the king and the cardinal, and are, therefore, as ambassadors, able to act with impunity, a thing that General Oliver Cromwell, who is assuredly as great a politician as he is a general, is quite the man to understand. Ask him, then, for the written order. What will that cost you, my dear Monsieur Mordaunt? Yes, the written order, said Porthos, who now began to comprehend what D'Artagnan was aiming at. We ask only for that. However inclined Mordaunt was to have recourse to violence, he understood the reasons D'Artagnan had given him. Besides, completely ignorant of the friendship which existed between the 4 Frenchmen, all his uneasiness disappeared when he heard of the plausible motive of the ransom. He decided, therefore, not only to fetch the order, but the 2,000 pistoles at which he estimated the prisoners. He therefore mounted his horse and disappeared. Good, thought D'Artagnan. A quarter of an hour to go to the tent, a quarter of an hour to return. It is more than we need. Then turning, without the least change of countenance, to Porthos, he said, looking him full in the face, "Friend Porthos, listen to this. First, not a syllable to either of our friends of what you have heard. It is unnecessary for them to know the service we are going to render them." "Very well, I understand." "Go to the stable. You will find Mousquet in there. Saddle your horses. Put your pistols in your saddle-bags. Take out the horses and lead them to the street below this, so that there will be nothing to do but mount them. All the rest is my business." Porthos made no remark, but obeyed, with the sublime confidence he had in his friend. "I go," he said, "only shall I enter the chamber where those gentlemen are?" "No, it is not worthwhile." "Well, do me the kindness to take my purse, which I left on the mantelpiece." "All right." He then proceeded, with his usual calm gait, to the stable and went into the very midst of the soldiery, who, foreigner as he was, could not help admiring his height and the enormous strength of his great limbs. At the corner of the street, he met Mousqueton and took him with him. D'Artagnan, meantime, went into the house, whistling a tune which he had begun before Porthos went away. "My dear Athos, I have reflected on your arguments, and I am convinced. I am sorry to have had anything to do with this matter. As you say, Mazarin is a knave. I have resolved to fly with you, not a word. Be ready. Your swords are in the corner. Do not forget them. They are in many circumstances very useful. There is Porthos's purse, too." He put it into his pocket. The 2 friends were perfectly stupefied. "Well, pray, is there anything to be so surprised at?" he said. "I was blind. Athos has made me see, that's all. Come here." The 2 friends went near him. "Do you see that street? There are the horses. Go out by the door, turn to the right, jump into your saddles, all will be right. Don't be uneasy at anything except mistaking the signal. That will be the signal when I call out, 'Jesus Seigneur.' But give us your word that you will come too, D'Artagnan," said Athos. "I swear I will, by heaven." "'Tis settled," said Aramis. "At the cry, 'Jesus Seigneur,' we go out, upset all that stands in our way, run to our horses, jump into our saddles, spur them. Is that all?" "Exactly." "See, Aramis, as I have told you, D'Artagnan is first amongst us all," said Athos. "Very true," replied the Gascon, "but I always run away from compliments. Don't forget the signal. Jesus Seigneur," and he went out as he came in, whistling the self-same air. The soldiers were playing or sleeping. Two of them were singing in a corner out of tune, the psalm, "On the rivers of Babylon." D'Artagnan called the sergeant. "My dear friend, General Cromwell has sent Monsieur Mordaunt to fetch me. Guard the prisoners well, I beg of you." The sergeant made a sign, as much as to say he did not understand French, and D'Artagnan tried to make him comprehend by signs and gestures. Then he went into the stable. He found the 5 horses saddled, his own amongst the rest. "Each of you take a horse by the bridle," he said to Porthos and Mousqueton. "Turn to the left so that Athos and Aramis may see you clearly from the window." "They are coming, then," said Porthos. "In a moment. You didn't forget my purse?" "No, be easy." "Good." Porthos and Mousqueton each took a horse by the bridle and proceeded to their post. Then D'Artagnan, being alone, struck a light and lighted a small bit of tinder, mounted his horse and stopped at the door in the midst of the soldiers. There, caressing, as he pretended, the animal with his hand, he put this bit of burning tinder in his ear. It was necessary to be as good a horseman as he was to risk such a scheme, for no sooner had the animal felt the burning tinder than he uttered a cry of pain and reared, and jumped as if he had been mad. The soldiers, whom he was nearly trampling, ran away. "Help! Help!" cried D'Artagnan. "Stop, my horse has the staggers." In an instant the horse's eyes grew bloodshot, and he was white with foam. "Help!" cried D'Artagnan. "What?" "Will you let me be killed?" "Jesus Seigneur." No sooner had he uttered this cry than the door opened, and Athos and Aramis rushed out. The coast, owing to the Gascon's stratagem, was clear. "The prisoners are escaping." "The prisoners are escaping," cried the sergeant. "Stop." "Stop," cried D'Artagnan, giving rein to his famous steed, who, darting forth, overturned several men. "Stop." "Stop," cried the soldiers, and ran for their arms. But the prisoners were in their saddles, and lost no time hastening to the nearest gate. In the middle of the street, they saw Grimaud and Blaisois, who were coming to find their masters. With one wave of his hand, Athos made Grimaud, who followed the little troop, understand everything, and they passed on like a whirlwind, D'Artagnan still directing them from behind with his voice. They passed through the gate like apparitions, without the guards thinking of detaining them, and reached the open country. All this time the soldiers were calling out, "Stop! Stop!" and the sergeant, who began to see that he was the victim of an artifice, was almost in a frenzy of despair. Whilst all this was going on, a cavalier in full gallop was seen approaching. It was Mordaunt, with the order in his hand. "The prisoners!" he exclaimed, jumping off his horse. The sergeant had not the courage to reply. He showed him the open door, the empty room. Mordaunt darted to the steps, understood all, uttered a cry, as if his very heart was pierced, and fell fainting on the stone steps. Chapter 59. Noble natures never lose courage, nor good stomachs their appetites. The little troop, without looking behind them or exchanging a word, fled at a rapid gallop, fording a little stream, of which none of them knew the name, and leaving on their left a town which Athos declared to be Durham. At last they came in sight of a small wood, and spurring their horses afresh, rode in its direction. As soon as they had disappeared behind a green curtain sufficiently thick to conceal them from the sight of anyone who might be in pursuit, they drew up to hold a council together. The two grooms held the horses, that they might take a little rest without being unsaddled, and Grimaud was posted as sentinel. "Come, first of all," said Athos to D'Artagnan, "my friend, that I may shake hands with you, you our rescuer, you, the true hero of us all." "Athos is right, you have my adoration," said Aramis, in his turn pressing his hand. "To what are you not equal, with your superior intelligence, infallible eye, your arm of iron, and your enterprising mind?" "Now," said the Gascon, "that is all well, I accept for Porthos and myself everything. Thanks and compliments. We have plenty of time to spare." The two friends, recalled by D'Artagnan to what was also due to Porthos, pressed his hand in their turn. "And now," said Athos, "it is not our plan to run anywhere and like madmen, but we must map up our campaign. What shall we do? What are we going to do, i'faith?" "It is not very difficult to say." "Tell us, then, D'Artagnan." "We are going to reach the nearest seaport, unite our little resources, hire a vessel, and return to France. As for me, I will give my last sou for it. Life is the greatest treasure, and speaking candidly, ours hangs by a thread. What do you say to this, Du Vallon?" "I," said Porthos, "I am entirely of D'Artagnan's opinion. This is a beastly country, this England." "You are quite decided, then, to leave it?" asked Athos of D'Artagnan. "Egad, I don't see what is to keep me here." A glance was exchanged between Athos and Aramis. "Go, then, my friends," said the former, sighing. "How go, then?" exclaimed D'Artagnan. "Let us go, you mean?" "No, my friend," said Athos, "you must leave us." "Leave you!" cried D'Artagnan, quite bewildered at this unexpected announcement. "Bah," said Porthos, "why separate since we are all together? Because you can and ought to return to France. Your mission is accomplished, but ours is not." "Your mission is not accomplished," exclaimed D'Artagnan, looking in astonishment at Athos. "No, my friend," replied Athos, in his gentle but decided voice. "We came here to defend King Charles. We have but ill defended him. It remains for us to save him." "To save the king," said D'Artagnan, looking at Aramis as he had looked at Athos. Aramis contented himself by making a sign with his head. D'Artagnan's countenance took an expression of the deepest compassion. He began to think he had to do with madmen. "You cannot be speaking seriously, Athos," said he. "The king is surrounded by an army which is conducting him to London. This army is commanded by a butcher, or the son of a butcher. It matters little, Colonel Harrison. His Majesty, I can assure you, will be tried on his arrival in London. I have heard enough from the lips of Oliver Cromwell to know what to expect." A second look was exchanged between Athos and Aramis. "And when the trial is ended, there will be no delay in putting the sentence into execution," continued D'Artagnan. "And to what penalty do you think the king will be condemned?" asked Athos. "The penalty of death, I greatly fear. They have gone too far for him to pardon them, and there is nothing left to them but one thing, and that is to kill him. Have you never heard what Oliver Cromwell said when he came to Paris, and was shown the dungeon at Vincennes where Monsieur de Vendôme was imprisoned?" "What did he say?" asked Porthos. "Princes must be knocked on the head." "I remember it," said Athos. "And you fancy he will not put his maxim into execution, now that he has got hold of the king? On the contrary, I am certain he will do so. But then that is all the more reason why we should not abandon the august head so threatened." "Athos, you are becoming mad." "No, my friend," Athos gently replied. "But De Winter sought us out in France and introduced us, Monsieur de Herblay and myself, to Madame Henrietta. Her Majesty did us the honor to ask our aid for her husband. We engaged our word. Our word included everything. It was our strength, our intelligence, our life, in short, that we promised. It remains now for us to keep our word. Is that your opinion, de Herblay? Yes, said Aramis, we have promised. Then, continued Athos, we have another reason. It is this, listen. In France at this moment everything is poor and paltry. We have a king 10 years old, who doesn't yet know what he wants. We have a queen blinded by a belated passion. We have a minister who governs France as he would govern a great farm. That is to say, intent only on turning out all the gold he can by the exercise of Italian cunning and invention. We have princes who set up a personal and egotistic opposition, who will draw from Mazarin's hands only a few ingots of gold or some shreds of power granted as bribes. I have served them without enthusiasm. God knows that I estimated them at their real value, and that they are not high in my esteem, but on principle. Today I am engaged in a different affair. I have encountered misfortune in a high place, a royal misfortune, a European misfortune. I attach myself to it. If we can succeed in saving the king, it will be good. If we die for him, it will be grand. So you know beforehand you must perish, said D'Artagnan. We fear so, and our only regret is to die so far from both of you. What will you do in a foreign land, an enemy's country? I traveled in England when I was young. I speak English like an Englishman, and Aramis, too, knows something of the language. Ah, if we had you, my friends. With you, D'Artagnan, with you, Porthos, all four reunited for the first time for 20 years, we would dare not only England, but the 3 kingdoms put together. And did you promise the Queen, resumed D'Artagnan, petulantly, to storm the Tower of London, to kill 100,000 soldiers, to fight victoriously against the wishes of the nation and the ambition of a man, and when that man is Cromwell? Do not exaggerate your duty. In heaven's name, my dear Athos, do not make a useless sacrifice. When I see you merely, you look like a reasonable being. When you speak, I seem to have to do with a madman. Come, Porthos, join me. Say frankly, what do you think of this business? Nothing good, replied Porthos. Come, continued D'Artagnan, who, irritated that instead of listening to him, Athos seemed to be attending to his own thoughts. You have never found yourself the worse for my advice. Well then, believe me, Athos, your mission is ended, and ended nobly. Return to France with us. Friend, said Athos, our resolution is irrevocable. Then you have some other motive unknown to us. Athos smiled, and D'Artagnan struck his hands together in anger and muttered the most convincing reasons that he could discover. But to all these reasons Athos contented himself by replying with a calm, sweet smile, and Aramis by nodding his head. Very well, cried D'Artagnan at last, furious. Very well, since you wish it, let us leave our bones in this beggarly land where it is always cold, where fine weather is a fog, fog is rain, and rain a deluge, where the sun represents the moon and the moon a cream cheese. In truth, whether we die here or elsewhere matters little, since we must die. Only reflect, my good fellow, said Athos. It is but dying rather sooner. Pooh. A little sooner or a little later, it isn't worth quarreling over. If I am astonished at anything, remarked Porthos sententiously, it is that it has not already happened. Oh, it will happen, you may be sure, said D'Artagnan. So it is agreed, and if Porthos makes no objection. Aye, said Porthos, I will do whatever you please, and besides, I think what the Comte de la Fere said just now is very good. But your future career, D'Artagnan, your ambition, Porthos. Our future, our ambition, replied D'Artagnan with feverish volubility. Need we think of that since we are to save the king? The king saved, we shall assemble our friends together. We will head the Puritans, reconquer England. We shall re-enter London, place him securely on his throne. And he will make us dukes and peers, said Porthos, whose eyes sparkled with joy at this imaginary prospect. Or he will forget us, added D'Artagnan. Oh, said Porthos. Well, that has happened, friend Porthos. It seems to me that we once rendered Anne of Austria a service not much less than that which today we are trying to perform for Charles I. But nonetheless, Anne of Austria has forgotten us for 20 years. Well, in spite of that, D'Artagnan, said Athos, you are not sorry that you were useful to her. No, indeed, said D'Artagnan. I admit even that in my darkest moments I find consolation in that remembrance. You see, then, D'Artagnan, though princes often are ungrateful, God never is. Athos, said D'Artagnan, I believe that were you to fall in with the devil, you would conduct yourself so well that you would take him with you to heaven. So, then, said Athos, offering his hand to D'Artagnan. "'Tis settled," replied D'Artagnan. "I find England a charming country, and I stay, but on one condition only. What is it? That I am not forced to learn English. Well, now," said Athos, triumphantly, "I swear to you, my friend, by the God who hears us, I believe that there is a power watching over us, and that we shall all four see France again." "So be it," said D'Artagnan, "but I confess I have a contrary conviction." "Our good D'Artagnan," said Aramis, "represents among us the opposition in Parliament, which always says no and always does aye. But in the meantime saves the country," added Athos. "Well, now that everything is decided," cried Porthos, rubbing his hands, "suppose we think of dinner. It seems to me that in the most critical positions of our lives we have always dined." "Oh, yes, speak of dinner in a country where for a feast they eat boiled mutton, and as a treat drink beer. What the devil did you come to such a country for, Athos?" "But I forgot," added the Gascon, smiling. "Pardon, I forgot you are no longer Athos, but never mind, let us hear your plan for dinner, Porthos." "My plan? Yes, have you a plan?" "No. I am hungry, that is all." "Pardieu, if that is all, I am hungry too. But it is not everything to be hungry. One must find something to eat, unless we browse on the grass like our horses." "Ah!" exclaimed Aramis, who was not quite so indifferent to the good things of the earth as Athos. "Do you remember, when we were at Parpillote, the beautiful oysters that we ate? And the legs of mutton of the salt marshes," said Porthos, smacking his lips. "But," suggested D'Artagnan, "have we not our friend Mousqueton, who managed for us so well at Chantilly, Porthos?" "Yes," said Porthos, "we have Mousqueton, but since he has been steward, he has become very heavy. Never mind, let us call him, and to make sure that he will reply agreeably. Here." "Mouston," cried Porthos. Mouston appeared, with a most piteous face. "What is the matter, my dear M.?" "Mouston," asked D'Artagnan, "are you ill?" "Sir, I am very hungry," replied Mouston. "Well, it is just for that reason that we have called you, my good M. Mouston, could you not procure us a few of those nice little rabbits, and some of those delicious partridges, of which you used to make fricassees at the hotel? Faith, I do not remember the name of the hotel. At the hotel of, said Porthos, by my faith, nor do I remember it either. It does not matter, and a few of those bottles of old Burgundy wine, which cured your master so quickly of his sprain. Alas. Sir, said Mousqueton, I much fear that what you ask for are very rare things in this detestable and barren country, and I think we should do better to go and seek hospitality from the owner of a little house we see on the fringe of the forest. How? Is there a house in the neighborhood? Asked D'Artagnan. Yes, sir, replied Mousqueton. Well, let us, as you say, go and ask a dinner from the master of that house. What is your opinion, gentlemen, and does not M? Mouston's suggestion appear to you full of sense. Oh, said Aramis, suppose the master is a Puritan. So much the better, Mordu, replied D'Artagnan. If he is a Puritan, we will inform him of the capture of the king, and in honor of the news he will kill for us his fatted hens. But if he should be a cavalier, said Porthos. In that case we will put on an air of mourning, and he will pluck for us his black fowls." "You are very happy," exclaimed Athos, laughing in spite of himself at the sally of the irresistible Gascon, "for you see the bright side of everything." "What would you have?" said D'Artagnan. "I come from a land where there is not a cloud in the sky." "It is not like this, then," said Porthos, stretching out his hand to assure himself whether a chill sensation he felt on his cheek was not really caused by a drop of rain. "Come, come," said D'Artagnan, "more reason why we should start on our journey." "Halloo, Grimaud." Grimaud appeared. "Well, Grimaud, my friend, have you seen anything?" asked the Gascon. "Nothing," replied Grimaud. "Those idiots," cried Porthos, "they have not even pursued us." "No." "If we had been in their place—" "Yes, they are wrong," said D'Artagnan. "I would willingly have said 2 words to Mordaunt in this little desert. It is an excellent spot for bringing down a man in proper style." "I think, decidedly," observed Aramis, "gentlemen, that the son hasn't his mother's energy." "What, my good fellow," replied Athos, "wait a while, we have scarcely left him 2 hours ago. He does not know yet in what direction we came nor where we are. We may say that he is not equal to his mother when we put foot in France, if we are not poisoned or killed before then." "Meanwhile, let us dine," suggested Porthos. "I' faith, yes," said Athos, "for I am hungry." "Look out for the black fowls," cried Aramis. And the 4 friends, guided by Mousqueton, took up the way toward the house, already almost restored to their former gaiety. For they were now, as Athos had said, all 4 once more united and of single mind. Chapter 60. Respect to Fallen Majesty. As our fugitives approached the house, they found the ground cut up, as if a considerable body of horsemen had preceded them. Before the door the traces were yet more apparent. These horsemen, whoever they might be, had halted there. "Egad," cried D'Artagnan, "it's quite clear that the king and his escort have been by here." "The devil," said Porthos. "In that case they have eaten everything." "Bah," said D'Artagnan, "they will have left a chicken at least." He dismounted and knocked on the door. There was no response. He pushed open the door and found the first room empty and deserted. "Well," cried Porthos. "I can see nobody," said D'Artagnan. "Aha! What? Blood!" At this word the 3 friends leaped from their horses and entered. D'Artagnan had already opened the door of the second room, and from the expression of his face, it was clear that he there beheld some extraordinary object. The 3 friends drew near and discovered a young man stretched on the ground, bathed in a pool of blood. It was evident that he had attempted to regain his bed, but had not had sufficient strength to do so. Athos, who imagined that he saw him move, was the first to go up to him. "Well," inquired D'Artagnan. "Well, if he is dead," said Athos. "He has not been so long, for he is still warm. But no, his heart is beating." "Ho, there, my friend." The wounded man heaved a sigh. D'Artagnan took some water in the hollow of his hand and threw it upon his face. The man opened his eyes, made an effort to raise his head, and fell back again. The wound was in the top of his skull, and blood was flowing copiously. Aramis dipped a cloth into some water and applied it to the gash. Again the wounded man opened his eyes and looked in astonishment at these strangers, who appeared to pity him. "You are among friends," said Athos in English, "so cheer up and tell us, if you have the strength to do so, what has happened." "The king," muttered the wounded man, "the king is a prisoner." "You have seen him?" asked Aramis in the same language. The man made no reply. "Make your mind easy," resumed Athos. "We are all faithful servants of his Majesty." "Is what you tell me true?" asked the wounded man. "On our honor as gentlemen, then I may tell you all. I am brother to Parry, his Majesty's lackey." Athos and Aramis remembered that this was the name by which de Winter had called the man they had found in the passage of the king's tent. "We know him," said Athos. "He never left the king." "Yes, that is he." "Well, he thought of me when he saw the king was taken, and as they were passing before the house, he begged in the king's name that they would stop, as the king was hungry. They brought him into this room and placed sentinels at the doors and windows. Parry knew this room, as he had often been to see me when the king was at Newcastle. He knew that there was a trapdoor communicating with a cellar, from which one could get into the orchard. He made a sign, which I understood, but the king's guards must have noticed it and held themselves on guard. I went out as if to fetch wood, passed through the subterranean passage into the cellar, and whilst Parry was gently bolting the door, pushed up the board and beckoned to the king to follow me. Alas, he would not. But Parry clasped his hands and implored him, and at last he agreed. I went on first, fortunately. The king was a few steps behind me, when suddenly I saw something rise up in front of me like a huge shadow. I wanted to cry out to warn the king, but that very moment I felt a blow as if the house was falling on my head and fell insensible. When I came to myself again, I was stretched in the same place. I dragged myself as far as the yard. The king and his escort were no longer there. I spent perhaps an hour in coming from the yard to this place. Then my strength gave out and I fainted again. "And now how are you feeling?" "Very ill," replied the wounded man. "Can we do anything for you?" asked Athos. "Help to put me on the bed. I think I shall feel better there. Have you anyone to depend on for assistance? My wife is at Durham and may return at any moment. But you, is there nothing that you want? We came here with the intention of asking for something to eat. Alas, they have taken everything. There isn't a morsel of bread in the house." "You hear, D'Artagnan," said Athos. "We shall have to look elsewhere for our dinner." "It is all one to me now," said D'Artagnan. "I am no longer hungry." "Faith." "Neither am I," said Porthos. They carried the man to his bed and called Grimaud to dress the wound. In the service of the four friends, Grimaud had had so frequent occasion to make lint and bandages that he had become something of a surgeon. In the meantime, the fugitives had returned to the first room, where they took counsel together. "Now," said Aramis, "we know how the matter stands. The king and his escort have gone this way. We had better take the opposite direction, eh?" Athos did not reply. He reflected. "Yes," said Porthos. "Let us take the opposite direction. If we follow the escort, we shall find everything devoured and die of hunger. What a confounded country this England is. This is the first time I have gone without my dinner for 10 years, and it is generally my best meal. What do you think, D'Artagnan?" asked Athos. "Do you agree with Aramis?" "Not at all," said D'Artagnan. "I am precisely of the contrary opinion." "What?" "You would follow the escort," exclaimed Porthos in dismay. "No, I would join the escort." Athos's eyes shone with joy. "Join the escort," cried Aramis. "Let D'Artagnan speak," said Athos. "You know he always has wise advice to give." "Clearly," said D'Artagnan, "we must go where they will not look for us. Now they will be far from looking for us among the Puritans. Therefore, with the Puritans we must go." "Good, my friend, good," said Athos. "It is excellent advice. I was about to give it when you anticipated me." "That, then, is your opinion?" asked Aramis. "Yes. They will think we are trying to leave England, and will search for us at the ports. Meanwhile, we shall reach London with the king." Once in London we shall be hard to find without considering, continued Athos, throwing a glance at Aramis, the chances that may come to us on the way. Yes, said Aramis, I understand. I, however, do not understand, said Porthos. But no matter, since it is at the same time the opinion of D'Artagnan and of Athos, it must be the best. But, said Aramis, shall we not be suspected by Colonel Harrison? Egad, cried D'Artagnan, he's just the man I count upon. Colonel Harrison is one of our friends. We have met him twice at General Cromwell's. He knows that we were sent from France by Monsieur Mazarin. He will consider us as brothers. Besides, is he not a butcher's son? Well then, Porthos shall show him how to knock down an ox with a blow of the fist, and I how to trip up a bull by taking him by the horns. That will ensure his confidence. Athos smiled. You are the best companion that I know, D'Artagnan, he said, offering his hand to the Gascon, and I am very happy in having found you again, my dear son. This was, as we have seen, the term which Athos applied to D'Artagnan in his more expansive moods. At this moment, Grimaud came in. He had staunched the wound, and the man was better. The four friends took leave of him, and asked if they could deliver any message for him to his brother. Tell him, answered the brave man, to let the king know that they have not killed me outright. However insignificant I am sure that his majesty is concerned for me and blames himself for my death. Be easy, said D'Artagnan. He will know all before night. The little troop recommenced their march, and at the end of 2 hours perceived a considerable body of horsemen about half a league ahead. My dear friends, said D'Artagnan, give your swords to Monsieur Mouston, who will return them to you at the proper time and place, and do not forget you are our prisoners. It was not long before they joined the escort. The king was riding in front, surrounded by troopers, and when he saw Athos and Aramis, a glow of pleasure lighted his pale cheeks. D'Artagnan passed to the head of the column, and leaving his friends under the guard of Porthos, went straight to Harrison, who recognized him as having met him at Cromwell's, and received him as politely as a man of his breeding and disposition could. It turned out as D'Artagnan had foreseen. The colonel neither had nor could have any suspicion. They halted for the king to dine. This time, however, due precautions were taken to prevent any attempt at escape. In the large room of the hotel, a small table was placed for him, and a large one for the officers. Will you dine with me? Asked Harrison of D'Artagnan. Gad, I should be very happy, but I have my companion, Monsieur du Vallon, and the 2 prisoners, whom I cannot leave. Let us manage it better. Have a table set for us in a corner, and send us whatever you like from yours. Good, answered Harrison. The matter was arranged as D'Artagnan had suggested, and when he returned, he found the king already seated at his little table, where Parry waited on him, Harrison and his officers sitting together at another table, and in a corner, places reserved for himself and his companions. The table at which the Puritan officers were seated was round, and whether by chance or coarse intention, Harrison sat with his back to the king. The king saw the 4 gentlemen come in, but appeared to take no notice of them. They sat down in such a manner as to turn their backs on nobody. The officers' table and that of the king were opposite to them. "I' faith, Colonel," said D'Artagnan, "we are very grateful for your gracious invitation, for without you we ran the risk of going without dinner, as we have without breakfast. My friend here, Monsieur du Vallon, shares my gratitude, for he was particularly hungry. And I am so still," said Porthos, bowing to Harrison. "And how," said Harrison, laughing, "did this serious calamity of going without breakfast happen to you? "In a very simple manner, Colonel," said D'Artagnan. "I was in a hurry to join you, and took the road you had already gone by. You can understand our disappointment when, arriving at a pretty little house on the skirts of a wood, which at a distance had quite a gay appearance, with its red roof and green shutters, we found nothing but a poor wretch bathed. Ah, Colonel, pay my respects to the officer of yours who struck that blow." "Yes," said Harrison, laughing, and looking over at one of the officers seated at his table. "When Groslow undertakes this kind of thing, there's no need to go over the ground a second time." "Ah, it was this gentleman," said D'Artagnan, bowing to the officer. "I am sorry he does not speak French, that I might tender him my compliments." "I am ready to receive and return them, sir," said the officer, in pretty good French, "for I resided 3 years in Paris. Then, sir, allow me to assure you that your blow was so well directed that you have nearly killed your man." "Nearly." "I thought I had quite," said Groslow. "No. It was a very near thing, but he is not dead." As he said this, D'Artagnan gave a glance at Parry, who was standing in front of the king, to show him that the news was meant for him. The king, too, who had listened in the greatest agony, now breathed again. "Hang it," said Groslow, "I thought I had succeeded better. If it were not so far from here to the house, I would return and finish him. And you would do well, if you are afraid of his recovering. For you know, if a wound in the head does not kill at once, it is cured in a week." And D'Artagnan threw a second glance toward Parry, on whose face such an expression of joy was manifested that Charles stretched out his hand to him, smiling. Parry bent over his master's hand and kissed it respectfully. "I've a great desire to drink the king's health," said Athos. "Let me propose it, then," said D'Artagnan. "Do," said Aramis. Porthos looked at D'Artagnan, quite amazed at the resources with which his companion's Gascon sharpness continually supplied him. D'Artagnan took up his camp tin cup, filled it with wine, and arose. "Gentlemen," said he, "let us drink to him who presides at the repast. Here's to our colonel, and let him know that we are always at his commands as far as London and farther." And as D'Artagnan, as he spoke, looked at Harrison, the colonel imagined the toast was for himself. He arose and bowed to the 4 friends, whose eyes were fixed on Charles, while Harrison emptied his glass without the slightest misgiving. The king, in return, looked at the 4 gentlemen and drank with a smile full of nobility and gratitude. "Come, gentlemen," cried Harrison, regardless of his illustrious captive, "let us be off. Where do we sleep, Colonel?" "At Thirsk," replied Harrison. "Parry," said the king, rising too, "my horse, I desire to go to Thirsk." "Egad," said D'Artagnan to Athos, "your king has thoroughly taken me, and I am quite at his service." "If what you say is sincere," replied Athos, "he will never reach London." "How so?" "Because before then we shall have carried him off." "Well, this time, Athos," said D'Artagnan, "upon my word you are mad." "Have you some plan in your head, then?" asked Aramis. "Aye," said Porthos, "the thing would not be impossible with a good plan." "I have none," said Athos, "but D'Artagnan will discover one." D'Artagnan shrugged his shoulders, and they proceeded.